I've been waiting 40 years for this. They called themselves Ghostbusters.
What exactly makes a Ghostbusters movie a Ghostbusters movie? Big personalities in jumpsuits, proton packs, distinctive ghouls, maybe some jokes if you've got the time for it. How much more than that is really necessary? Those trappings were enough to make the 1984 original a classic, and every Ghostbusters movie that has come since has been judged based on how well it assembles those building blocks. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire bears some superficial resemblance to its better forerunners, and for some, the allure of more time with Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and Ernie Hudson in uniform will be impossible to ignore, but the Ghostbusters Afterlife sequel buckles under the weight of an uninspired, ballooning plot that leaves little room for comedy, which is a problem because it's Ghostbusters. Frustratingly, Frozen Empire gets off to a solid enough start, beginning with the wise move to port the action back over to New York City. Jason Reitman's Amblin-esque small-town approach to Ghostbusters Afterlife delighted some, but for those of us who found that story of Spengler reconciliation to be slow and self-serious, the pivot back to a more stimulating and familiar locale feels right. And those feelings are momentarily validated by a fun ghost chase through the city streets that director Gil Kenan uses to re-establish the Spengler family dynamics. Amidst the "I'll turn this car around" chaos going on inside the Ecto-1, we find that Callie and step-teacher Gary have moved kids Phoebe and Trevor back to New York to join the family business. The movie's opening salvo is unfortunately also its strongest. The Ghostbusters once more run afoul of former EPA inspector and current mayor Walter Peck, who uses their recklessness as an excuse to restrict their efforts and completely bench Phoebe from the team just when they'll need her most. The plucky, awkward heroine was a consistent highlight of Afterlife, but while McKenna Grace remains charming and offbeat as ever in the role here, Frozen Empire saddles her with a completely muddled arc in which a character we know to be very smart is forced to do some very dumb things. Phoebe's angsty clashes with the rest of her family put her into the path of Melody, a kindred spirit with unfinished business. Aside from ham-handed stabs at cross-dimensional romance for Phoebe to consider, Melody feels totally adrift here, especially once Frozen Empire trots out its bafflingly complicated plot.
For the first time in New York history, a room full of people froze to death in July.
As the central ghost story unfolds, the audience is asked to track the importance and function of all manner of minutiae. Secret explorer organizations, ancient orbs, mystical fire heroes, and the broken horns of a demon all come into play. If anyone else sees this movie and thinks Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny when they see the broken horns stuff, the "I am complete," hit me up online because we're kindred spirits. Maybe all of those things sound good on paper, they definitely sound like they'd be great for the cover of a metal album, but all of the doomsaying and mythology that has to be built into the script to account for all that stuff leaves the characters with little to do but continually re-rack the stakes. It's an act of desperation and overcompensation on the part of Kenan and Reitman's script. If one element of the overstuffed story isn't working for you, hey, maybe you'll find another reason to stay invested. Based on my experience with this movie, you probably won't. The vengeful god opposing the Ghostbusters sets up a third act that rapidly devolves into a mess of CG ice and snow. There's even a sky beam for good measure. And no, just because Ghostbusters had one of the first sky beams, it doesn't mean that they get away with it. It all leaves the cast seeming exhausted by the end, collectively unsure how much they should balance the weight of the apocalyptic circumstances with the need to keep things as light as a Ghostbusters movie should be. Frozen Empire's unfocused and repeated attempt at keeping these characters relevant for modern audiences holds it back at every turn.
Right, well, overruled.
Sustained.
Thank you.
That aspect of Frozen Empire really highlights what's missing here, a cohesive central unit of funny Ghostbusters. The Spenglers spend much of the runtime at odds with each other, and hell, Trevor spends half the movie off on his own little solo ghost hunt. Much of their interplay feels like pot shots meant to blow off steam. Paul Rudd and Carrie Coon have good chemistry, but few laughs come from the trials of integrating a new father figure into the family. As the scale of the spectral threat increases, Kenan piles on supporting character after supporting character to keep up with exposition duties, with Ghostbusters vet Annie Potts and comedians James Acaster and Patton Oswalt all stopping by to dump information when the plot calls for it, which is very, very often. Kumail Nanjiani has a slightly larger role as Nadeem, a vape shop owner with a part to play in the Ghostbusters' plan to save the day, but not even Nanjiani's reliable comedic voice can rise above his character's preposterous function within the plot. Frozen Empire can't even bear to let go of afterlife characters like Podcast and Lucky, who don't bring much to the table here and call even more attention to the story's slipshod construction. That goes double for the returning mini puffs, whose obnoxious presence feels like insult added to injury. Totally unfunny, sadist marshmallows are not cheap to render, and with so many of Frozen Empire's failings hinging on distracting CG crap, it makes me wish the filmmakers had spent that extra time and money on shooting a couple extra scenes where the talented cast was allowed to, be funny on camera. I know, crazy. It's insane.
What are you doing?
It's a nightmare.
At least Frozen Empire makes good on Afterlife's promise of more time with the original surviving Ghostbusters. Aykroyd's Ray Stantz, Murray's Peter Venkman, and Hudson's Winston Zeddemore. Of the three, Ray feels the most successfully integrated into the Spangler's story. In contrast to his character's struggles with letting go of his ghostbusting days, Aykroyd's warmth and the actor's comfort with taking a backseat to the next generation end up buying him a lot of goodwill here. That pays off in one of Frozen Empire's only strong emotional moments, with Ray pondering what it's like to be a ghost, a blurring of the boundaries between paranormally obsessed actor and the paranormally obsessed character he plays. Winston has amassed a fortune large enough to bankroll all manner of ghostbusting, but while the outsized leadership role for Hudson is cool, the intriguing notion of the Ghostbusters' transformation into a national franchise is totally backgrounded. For ages, the story went that it was Bill Murray's reluctance to reprise the role of Peter Venkman that delayed a Ghostbusters sequel for so long. And after his cameo in Afterlife, his slightly larger presence in Frozen Empire doesn't quite make the wait worth it. Venkman breezes in and out with that casual Murray charm, which is good for a couple laughs, but by the time New York City is freezing over, the character has nothing to do but look mildly concerned when the CG frost starts to creep up his legs. And by the way, if anybody was very excited for a Venkman Peck rematch here in Frozen Empire, temper your expectations. The characters barely share any screen time, and what they do it's over in a flash.
Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
Ghostbusters Frozen Empire races onto thin ice, overburdened with disparate, uninspired ideas, and no one behind or in front of the camera quite knows what to do once the movie's flailing in the water. The new generation of Ghostbusters have to give up way too much time to an overcomplicated plot, time that could have been used to embellish the bedrock elements of comedy horror that the 1984 original deployed so well. If all you need to feel good about busting is ghosts, jumpsuits, and proton packs, you may have some fun, but Frozen Empire makes one thing clear. The franchise should be put in cold storage until someone can figure out how to do justice to the central concept without Murray, Aykroyd, Hudson, and Potts dropping by to prevent mass hysteria.
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria!
Thanks for watching. For more movie reviews, check out what we thought of Civil War and The Fall Guy, and as always, be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you like to watch IGN.